Hey, good people. Welcome to the Evolving Education Project podcast, hosted by me, Dr. Tiffany M, Nyachae, and friends, where we center the educational joys, passions, interests, and inquiries of people of color. Happy 2025. We're back. This is episode 30, where my guest interviews me about the Evolving Education Project, its origins, and the importance of creating a platform for diverse voices in education. Our discussion also covers how topics and guests are selected for the podcast, listener engagement, and future visions for the project. I also emphasize the power of podcasting as a medium for dialogue and knowledge sharing, particularly among communities of color. We would like to begin by shouting out the cities, towns, and townships of our newest listeners. We have new listeners in Worcester, Massachusetts, West Orange, New Jersey, Cary, North Carolina, Jacksonville, Florida, Lewis, Delaware, Arlington, Texas, Sparta, Tennessee, San Jose, California, Santa Ana, California, and Westminster, California. Our audience is growing, y'all, and we know it's because of word of mouth. Thank you. We appreciate y'all for pressing play and listening in your car, at the gym, on your walk, wherever. Please continue to share this podcast with others. We also want to say thank you to everyone who used their holiday break to listen to past episodes, to catch up on any episodes that you missed. We were so excited to see that our downloads continued even when we were on pause. Folks are discovering our podcast. Folks are either have been fans for a while, listeners for a while, and they are going back and listening to episodes that they missed. We thank you so much. Thank you. We see y'all. We know y'all, so we appreciate your support. This episode offers a behind-the-scenes look at our podcast. My dear friend and sis, Dr. Josephine Pham of the Mai Pedagogy Project, came up with the idea for this episode and co-produced it in the area of content planning as a way to feature me as a research artivist. Ooh, she called me that. Wow. Through her project's website. Created by Josephine, the seeds for Mai Pedagogy Project emerged out of a desire and dream for reimagining how knowledge in the field of education is created, represented, and shared beyond the current systems that exist. Feeling stifled by the compartmentalization of knowledge that existed across community, institutional, and academic spaces, she craved for more expansive outlets for painting a fuller picture of the everyday practices and livelihood of youth, educators, and communities of color, and privately engaged in more creative tools for capturing the complex stories and practices of educational justice that she's witnessed, having spent thousands of hours in K-12 schools, higher education, and community settings. Inspired by ongoing conversations with friends, family, and femtors, she was encouraged to make public Mai Pedagogy Project's intimate creations. She aspires to continue building and collaborating with scholar-educator artists and other community members to expand new creations, representations, and disseminations of knowledge and practices for educational justice. Josephine H. Pham, PhD, yes, doctor, is an assistant professor of critical studies in education in the education department at the University of California, Santa Cruz, and faculty affiliate in the critical race and ethnic studies department. Her lived experiences as a daughter of Vietnamese refugees, former K-12 classroom teacher in her own communities, and teacher educator influence her women of color feminist approach to research with and among teachers of color. Drawing upon critical social theories of race and methodological tools from literacy, the learning sciences, and educational anthropology, Pham's interdisciplinary research blends counter-narratives, video ethnography, and the arts to examine the liberatory educational possibilities already inherent in the everyday practices and embodied presence of justice-centered teachers of color. Okay, let's listen in as Josephine guides me through sharing a behind-the-scenes look of the Evolving Education Project. Josephine!
Hi, Sissy.
Thank you for being here today. I need to switch roles because actually I don't need to be saying that. You need to be thanking me because you're going to be interviewing me. You the host.
Yep. You on the hot seat this time, so I'm excited. Then excited.
I'm in the hot seat. I love it. So I'm gonna let you run this, sis, because this is really, I say this all the time, this your show, but this is really her show. She's running this.
Well, thank you for agreeing to talk with me and for Mai Pedagogy Project. So for those of you who don't know, it is a web-based platform. And it really came out of a desire for how to reimagine how knowledge in the field of education is created and shared beyond the current systems that exist. And we are big fans of the Evolving Education Project and Dr. Nyachae. And so part of this platform is also celebrating and amplifying the work of scholar, educator, artists who are already curating knowledge in the field of education in non-traditional forms. And so our first question for you, if that's okay, is tell us the origin story of the Evolving Education Project.
Ooh, I think the origin story. I think I was feeling like a bit of a disconnect when I was like, oh man, I hate when I'm being questioned because then I have a lot of ums. But when I was a doctoral student, I came to the doctoral program having left the classroom. And while I loved the academic space and the scholarly space to think deeply about my craft as a teacher that you don't have time to do when you're a teacher because you're busy doing a million other things, I also felt a disconnect from like people that practitioners, communities, and people that are on the ground every day with youth, whether as parents, whether, teachers or these nonprofit organizations or these community organizations. And I felt that my scholarly work is so motivated from my work with youth and in communities that I just felt like we weren't talking to each other. And I also didn't want moving forward for me, it's okay for other folks, but for me, my work or my conversations to only be with academics or to only be in a space where they don't have access to these conversations, even though they're informing these conversations and have a lot to say about what's happening in education. And I mean that in an expansive sense in a lot of different ways. And then I've always been kind of creative. Like whatever job I have, I did programs as a teacher and Black history productions with, creating stuff. And so I always need some type of artistic and creative outlet. I like doing productions. And I feel like, I used to write, even when I was a kid, I wrote plays. My church that I grew up in allowed me to flourish in those areas and celebrated me as a writer, a creative writer. And I like putting together events and productions and things like that. And so I feel like every week I get to put together a production. Like with a podcast, you get to like curate a series or you get to think about intro and in the middle and have music and all of this. And so it's all that. And then I will be talking to people, sharing my little ideas just to test people out in academia. Some of my academic friends, they're like, yeah, that would be a good resource for us. Yeah. And so that was encouraging. So yes.
I love that we get this vision of your inner child and your middle school teacher self as part of what you do now too. So of the many productions that you could have taken, why a podcast as your chosen format?
Yeah, I like to be in dialogue with others. I like to be in conversation with others. I really enjoy that. I really enjoy co-constructing knowledge through dialogue. I'm very relational. So I like how a podcast allows you to talk to other people and cultivate relationships with folks and also just support others, but still learning about topics and support. There's so many people doing such great work. And there's so many people that I look up to, that I love, that I respect, that we don't live in proximity to each other, or everybody's so busy and you can't, but you invite people to a podcast and you get to learn about them and their work or their organization or their writing or their art in a different and intimate way, I feel. And I enjoy that. I really do. And I love to talk. I love to be with people. I love to be having dialogue and conversations. And so a podcast, and I also think for me, a podcast really honors it's freeing to me being able to just talk when we have to write papers all the time. And it's so much pressure. It's so much has to be a particular way. And that's our job. I feel like this is more culturally aligned with me because Black people, Indigenous people, a lot of people of color, we come from oral traditions where we are relational, we are communal, we talk about, we're not strict where it has to be this boring, strict, rigid way. And I feel like I can still be intellectual, but I can can have these very natural conversations and not have the pressure of perfection. I feel like the podcast really frees me from having to be perfect or having to know it all. I don't have to know everything. I can invite people to learn. I'm not an expert of everything that we discuss, but I'm curious about everything that's discussed on the podcast. And I think it's important. So the podcast allows me to, it's a great platform for that. And it makes it accessible to people. Like anybody can listen to this. So
I think part of the many beauties of what you're talking about too, in addition to the intimate space that's created here, but also intimate spaces for listeners and peoples whose names we may never know. I think you're also speaking to the colonial ways that we've internalized and expected to produce in scholarship that is often about the finality, the polishedness, the outcome, which I think a lot of folks in education and practitioners and scholars and knowledge creators can relate to. And there's something about being able to be in the moment that I think your work and this podcast invites. And I know has definitely helped expand how I myself have felt really stunted in how I'm able to show up and create as a scholar, as an educator, and as an artist myself. So I just want to thank you for just making that connection to our own knowledge systems too. There's so many things that you shared that I want to ask more questions about. I think one thing that I'm sitting with too is there are so many amazing people doing great work. And so wondering if you could share a little bit more about how do you decide topics or guests for each season and how that's evolved over time?
Oh, that is a huge question. I usually just books that I want to read anyway. And you know the story, you know the saying, once you become a professor and you're no longer a student, you never have time to read. Everybody says that. Or you're just reading for the next paper you have to write or the class that you're teaching. And I don't want to do that. You know, I don't want to just read for the paper that I have to write. And I get that's a strategy. I get we don't have a lot of time. I don't want to just read because I'm teaching a class. I want to read because I want to be able to read important books that are interesting, that will inform my practice with the communities that I work with. And so they come across a lot of social media. You know, I have so many so brilliant friends and associates throughout my profession, and I'll see something, and if it aligns, you know, some stuff doesn't align. So I'm really, and it's not that it's not an important book. I really have always from the beginning, and then I'll tell you how it evolved. I've always from the beginning have wanted to center authors of color, and not just authors of color writing about anything in education, but authors of color who are writing to people in communities and youth of color who are maybe not only, but you can feel that in their book, like it feels like it's talking to you. I really don't have books that are I really don't invite books, and not that this work isn't important, because it is important, that are like trying to teach white people how to be better or whatever. That's not really what we're doing with the podcast. And I have some of my research does that. So I'm not hating on it. I'm not going to act like I don't ever do that work, but that's not what I want this for. I just wanted to be like our books that speak to what we're interested in and what we care about in our different communities. How that has evolved over the time is that now I've had publishers or agents reach out to me. And so that's interesting. I really appreciate it when it's a good fit, because I'm like, oh, you understand. That's encouraging. Like, oh, you understand what we do here and what it is. And so you specifically you didn't send me all of your book. You picked this one book and said, this one goes. And I'm like, yes, I'm really big on, I don't really care about if it's a new book. I think that's very important to me, that I don't care if it's like the most famous person in academia, but sometimes we do have people that are really famous, it's really like, but I'm not like, it's not a criteria that they have to be this super famous person or, edu celebrity or whatever. And it's also, I think there are books that are really great books that get a lot of shine that we may have on because they fit. And there are really, really great books that do not get a lot of shine that are just so important. Like Wayne Au, Anthony Brown, and Dolores Calderon's book, Reclaiming Multicultural Education. I can't believe that book is not like everywhere. Everybody don't know about that book. Because I feel like that book is so really informed, that I'm just giving that one book as an example of a book that really informed my thinking and my politics and how kind of led me, even though it's to ethnic studies even more deeply. And, and I'm just like, why isn't that book? So you never know. It's tricky. And I also think like some people have more capacity to promote their books. So that's why it gets more notoriety or whatever. And some people don't have the capacity to do that. And so that's also something, but I just want to have, whether it's an older book, whether it's a book that just came out, that's why, I want important conversations that we need to be thinking about as communities of color. I really am about solidarities, even though this election has me questioning that, but I do always want to have conversations that can sit in books that invite us to learn very specifically about a group, but is inviting us to be in solidarity with them, even if you're not with that knowledge, with that history, even if you're not necessarily from that group. And so I think we have to know about each other's struggles, and books that cause me to do that are important. Books that help us to rethink how we do, if you want to be specific to schooling or education more broadly, are so important to me. And I've also noticed that you having me reflect on this and really analyze, I do think I'm noticing a lot of organizing books around organizing and activism also is a part of the podcast. And I think because we're thinking about knowledges and histories, but we're also thinking about what is the work that we need to be doing now, and not just in classrooms and beyond in our communities. And what are we concerned about right now? What are we worried about? What are we excited about? What are we joyful about? What are we dreaming? What do we hope for? Because, that will sustain us. So that's how books are selected. And I think I have to keep coming back to our mission and to our politics and to our political commitments and all of that, so that we can honor that, because I don't want it to be a space where we're just having anybody on, even people of color, that really don't align with what we're doing, even though that may be an important book. And some of the books, you may not make it on the show because it doesn't go with the show, but I'll still have you in my class, you might fit in a syllabus. So I'll be citing people, in an article or a grant application or something. And it's tricky because I do think sometimes when people see stuff about people of color, it's anything, but I'm torn. Sometimes I have stuff about research approaches, but it has to be theory, and research is always a part of the conversation. But I hope folks understand, if it's heavy research, heavy theory, and it's not connected to real people in some type of way, even though not saying that's bad, because we need those things. That's not what we're doing here. It has to connect to communities and people and practitioners and things like that. Even though it's really organizers and activists, people, it has to be able to lend itself to that space. So if that makes sense. Sorry, my answers are long, but
no, please don't ever apologize for your responses and how you're thinking through these ideas. So you gave an example, which I think is really helping me wrap my brain around the many facets of how, because you're 2 seasons deep in now, right? And still in the midst of season 2. And then there was a gap in between where we got to hear you in conversation with former students as well. And so if you were to share with new listeners or current ongoing listeners what they might expect from your show, because some of the examples that you provided so far are examples related to amplifying books, and you've also had episodes where they were responding to the moment in terms of debates that are heavy on your heart and your spirit, as well as responding to the moment with regards to issues and how that relates to solidarity amongst communities of color, and many other ways that you've also thought about organic ways of responding through the podcast too. And so if you were to provide an invitation to new listeners to kind of just get a sense of what they might expect, and maybe even refer back to example episodes that they might tune into to get a sense of what do we mean here? Because when you were saying earlier that it's evolved based on agents and, places who've reached out who kind of understand the essence of what Evolving Education Project is, how would you share and give examples of different episodes, for example, for what new listeners might expect or come across, or maybe not expect from the project here?
That's such a great question. I have to really think about this. I think the main anchor are our series around books, but there are times when, you were talking about, where I either call it responding to the moment or I call it an interlude, where there's just things happening in the world that we need to respond to. So my first one in season 1 that was responding to the moment was in 2021, where there were attacks on anti-Asian attacks happening. And that was something that was really heavy, and we just needed to respond. And you were on that episode. Some other sisters was on that episode to talk about what this means in this moment and to show solidarity with Asian communities communities about that horrific, what was happening. And also this season, I've had an interlude about the science of reading because I am also a literacy scholar, but through the lens of communities of color. And so sometimes, so it's always going to be, if there's ever responding to the moment or an interlude, it's still always centered around communities of color. Usually what's missing from these conversations that we're not hearing, or to have more nuanced conversations around like why, like we did with Ruth Lopez about talking about the Latino vote in the election and trying to come to some understanding. And you will see that this is not a show where we're inviting people on to play devil's advocate or just, we're not up here like debating to debate. That doesn't mean we don't have different views, but people are on, we have a relationship or a respect, a beginning relationship where we're going to respect each other. I'm not trying to bring myself extra stress, or that stuff is heavy on your spirit when you're with people just to argue or just to debate for this. Like, we're not doing that. We're having love is guiding this work, care, deep political commitments. And that's what's guiding the work. And so those are the type of conversations you're going to see. Those are the type of guests that are going to be on. Not, and I want to be very clear, it's not that everybody has to agree, but it is coming from a place of relationship, respect, love, and the desire to, maybe I would say, a shared commitment to communities of color, to wanting to what's best for communities of color, and doing that in an intersectional way. So if you could be like, I love Black people, but you homophobic and you anti-trans and you ain't for queer folks, this ain't the show for you. You not going like we not doing that. The men of color that don't really like women, or you misogyny, or you like, that's not what we doing here. We're not doing that, or being like toxic patriarchy and all that type of stuff. No, but we can talk through things if you're willing to talk. Because I feel like in my experiences, just in my life, people say a lot of good things. People, it's like there are conversations that you can have with folks that are where somebody has some very problematic perspectives in our families, in our friend groups, our communities, and they are trying to work through some things and they are trying to learn something. That's different. I'm not going to necessarily I don't think this podcast is a space for that, but I understand that. But if we're being honest, there's a lot of people who they're not trying to change the way they think about these problematic areas. And we just need to be real about that. And what tends to happen is they blame the person that is pushing instead of looking at themselves and saying, or, other people be like, well, you should have this conversation. You're not trying to learn here. You're not trying to think through. You're pretty committed to these problematic ideas. And you really just want to argue with somebody. And I'm not going to do that. So we're not doing that. And you will see me. There's times when I'm corrected on the show. Like, I have no problem with I don't know everything. I'm learning. If you listen to the past episodes, you will see where it's like, oh, I didn't know that and I have to fix, or I'm corrected. So it's not, that's fine. But did I answer your question? Or I'm like, where am I now? Where am I?
I think so. Obviously we can look to your webpage and look at your founding story and your bio and see the episodes from week to week. And I think what you're sharing is kind of like the overarching commitments through which listeners can expect and come across. It's also helping me think about what you shared earlier about this profound sense of curiosity that guides how you think about your work. It's also helping me think about the naming of your project too, and the evolving sense of what is continuously durable and sustained in our communities, but also our need to continue to look at history and respond to how it reemerges and gets revived and recycled in so many different ways. There's something that is also sitting with me around what you shared in your origin story around the desire to be in relation and also the desire to create in these ways and to do so in collectivity. I know we've talked about this in our own informal conversations. Wondering if you can share what has surprised you about how the Evolving Education Project shaped how people engage, access, or experience what's happening in education.
Yeah, that's so great. I think what has surprised me is people who are interested. I knew it was a lot of people interested, but people who will see me at a conference or something like, oh my God, when you had that 40-year veteran teacher on, I loved her. And it made me think about when I was in school, or even just in my communities, like people just running into people, going back home and running into people like, yeah, that teacher that you like, and this is a person that's not in education. Some of them don't even have kids. And they're like, I remember I had a teacher like that, or like that touching a special place in them that surprised me, like learning about other folks in the world that's doing these amazing things, these organizations that are doing amazing things in communities, and how that can touch someone so deeply in their heart and take them to a place or give them hope has really surprised me, because we're still very new. We're still figuring it out. And I think that's beautiful. What has also surprised me is some of my authors have really helped shape the series. Like some of them really like, and it's okay if others don't. It's just like some of them just have, some people just get it and they just jump right in and they're like, they almost help you plan the series. Like, you can use this and, like the surprising, like the networking and the way folks will connect you to other folks. It's really beautiful. Or like, I'll invite somebody to be a co-host or like to be on. They're like, I can't do it, but you know what? You need to have this organization. I'll be like, oh my God, thank you. Like people are always helping, even if they can't be on the show or they can't do the thing, they're always helping. And that touches my heart so much, because when you're doing these things and you're growing and, you don't really have a huge team, it's a lot and you just want it to be good, and people just helping out and even a suggestion is very helpful to me. The email connects. I had one author who was like doing the emails to other people like, yeah, like I appreciate that labor. Like, like I was like, oh my God, thank you. You don't have to do that, but that they would do that. Also has surprised me is like how some of my former students want to help, and I'm always like, I don't want to exploit you. No, they be like, no, you help. This could build my resume. You ain't exploit me. I'm like, okay. What can you do? Like people that have wanted to help has really touched my heart. That has really surprised me. Like I can do this. Even got to shout out Nyachae Simmons, who does the trailers. She has been there from the beginning. Sometimes I'm like, oh, can you fix this? Can you do this? And she's like, okay. And she just does it. Like, it's just that, like, that's priceless. And you have to value people like that. Like they don't have to do that. And I'll be like, hey, I want you to change this. And I want you to put this and put a picture of this. And so like even her, that has also surprised, like the way we vibe, where I love working with her because I don't have to, like even the clips, like when you see those trailers on social media of the series, she chooses those clips. Like I don't choose those clips. And I love that because she is able to, as someone who is an educator, she works in a nonprofit organization, she was a teacher, she's able, her eyes on it to say, this is what would be important. This is like a powerful thing from where, listen, not my academic self doing it. She's so wonderful. And she has that eye. She's efficient. She gets stuff done, but she also gets the podcast to the point that she knows how to do that. And stuff like that is priceless. And then I have one of my former students helping me. I have to shout out Chelsea Thornton, who just her excitement and chill and coolness. And she like gets me together. She's like, okay, Miss Nyachae, we need to do this. She still calls me Miss Nyachae. She could call me Tiffany now because she helped me with the podcast. But she like makes a to-do list for me. Like we have like our little meetings and she be putting me to work. And like, cause sometimes I think like, I'm active. I said, Chelsea, I just want to be inviting people and having the conversations. I can't do all this administration stuff. This is too much. What else I got to do? Like it's a lot, like the administration stuff and like all of that. Like just let me like meet with the people and have a conversation and record the episode. That's all I want to do. But she like, no, you got to do this and that. So I like her because she's kind of like my little boss, because she'll be like, you need to do this. And she keeps me like with the podcast, like, you need to do that. Why aren't you? You're just missing out on those listeners because you didn't do this. And I'm like, okay, Chelsea, so she has a list. And every time we hit, the list keep growing. Chelsea, don't add nothing else to that list, please. But the list keep growing. And she has these things. And I appreciate her sharing her skill set with me, because I do have a lot of former students. Even I'll shout out Trinity Bryant, one of my former students, who they studied communications and they went to school. So they're like telling me, like, I didn't study communications. I'm doing a podcast, but they're like sharing their skill set and what they learned in communication to help me, to tell me things. So I'm learning from them because I don't do that. So she studied communications and things. So she's always like, and so it's fun because I get to like chit chat with her, but then I'm like doing my little work that she's telling me to do. So, in our meetings, and it's beautiful. Like, and I guess I'll go back to that surprising question is like how much this connects me to others. Like, even like I just did an episode with Kevin Clay and Kevin Lawrence Henry for their edited book, and I love them so much, and just to be able to talk to them very intimately about their work, they're so brilliant. It's just such a, and I have to even go back to my very first series with April Baker Bell, honey. Okay, that was so like we kiki just anyway, but it's like to kiki and bring our like her work, her book, and just talking about Black language, like it just feels so good. Like it just feels so filling. And and also I have to shout out Carla Espana and Luz Yadira Herrera for their In Comunidad book, because theirs is the highest download because they don't put that episode on everything that they do. And I just appreciate them so much. Like that's also surprising. And so those episodes in that series has the most listeners because they shared it. And and they didn't just share it, they put it on all of their platforms, and like you can go on certain stuff and you'll see it. Their episodes that they did that. And so that episode gets a lot, that series gets a lot of has like the most listens. That's surprising. And I'm grateful that they felt that it was that rich and valuable to put. And I also have to, what was this question again? Because I keep shouting out people, but I have to say, the co-host that they come, and I haven't had a lot this season because it's been moving really fast. You got to ask people in their time. They're busy. Everybody's busy. But what they bring to an interview with their perspectives is really beautiful. Grace, the player, who, oh my gosh, our artist, who you can hear her in the very first episode when we talk about what is the Evolving Education Project and the logo that she created, and that she just got it. Having people, you have to always value people, because when you're trying to do these type of endeavors, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners are artists and are doing things in different endeavors, even if it's pedagogically, it's really a blessing to have people that get it and that can flow with you. And I care more about that. I'd rather have a few people that can do that than have 20 people that don't get it. Yes, I don't even remember what your question was, but I just start showing people out.
How people have engaged or accessed and experienced this podcast. And it sounds like there's so many ways it's circulated in ways that you didn't anticipate in many ways. Listeners, guests, co-hosts, former students, and community members who have contributed and come back to this in some way or form.
I can say something more about listeners. They're so varied and they respond in so many different ways. Like even, I know I told you about like people stopping you run into them. They're like, yeah, girl, I listen to your podcast. Now, what was you saying about when you said? And I'm like, huh? What did I say? But there's that, and then people comment on it. Like I'm always like, please write a review, please write a review. But it's okay. Everybody's not writing reviews yet, but they will comment on a reel, or they will like, I got a most beautiful like. And I started out in the early episode. You'll hear me at the end saying, write us a story and tell us your stories. And I kind of took that out later on because I'm like, I'm gonna let them do what they do. That people aren't really doing that, so I'm not gonna ask people to do that, and they're not doing it. I think that's the hard thing about podcasting. The books that I read, I'm in deep study with trying to learn more about podcasting, is not giving listeners too many directions. So I'm in those early episodes, sorry y'all, I know I was like, can you do this? And can you do this? And can you do this? And support us? And yes, I need you to do 10 things if you support the podcast. I don't do all that no more. I just have about like 1 or 2 things. Because I used to do that. And then, study, you have to study this to get better at it. But what I'm noticing now is that like this one listener wrote this beautiful, long, I want to say reflective story in response to the In Comunidad book series, Espana and Herrera, about being Trinidad Chinese. She's Trinidadian, Chinese, Afro-Latina, like all of this, and how this helped her to think, she appreciated because it talked about all her identities and how she lived on all of these different places. And like, so you never know, like, and that was a YouTube comment. And then I had somebody else wrote something really beautiful on a Facebook reel comment, and people comment and say like, great, and looks interesting. But then there's people who comment who they listen to the show. They're like a listener, like you can tell. And so it's interesting, like, and so I'm just at a point now where I'm just like, I'm just going to follow them wherever, like I'm just going to follow them wherever they choose to share, and just because people aren't sharing or writing a review, that doesn't mean they're not. I know, because I run into people and they tell me, like that they're listening and they're enjoying it. And so it's being like, okay, it's uncertain, it's unsure, like you don't know. And you just, and that's, like can be scary sometimes, or like nerve wracking, but also exciting because it's like, however this unfolds, we're just going to go with it. And that has also taken a lot of pressure off of me too. It's like, okay,
Mm-hmm. On that note, I was going to say, I understand why there's like a list of things on how to support when you're launching. And now that you're in this season, what would it mean or look like to support the Evolving Education Project?
I think right now to support, we really want just tons of listeners. We want like more listeners. We think when people listen to it, they like it, but it's like, how do you get the word out so you can have, and I'm not trying to make everybody, like, I'm not one of those people that expect everybody in my family to listen, everybody in my community. I'm not like that, because this might not be for you. Might not be something you're interested in, and that's cool. But I do believe that there is a mass of people that if they found this, I just want the people that are for this, are looking for this and would want to be interested in these types of conversations. And I do believe that there's a mass of people who are looking and who would be interested in this. And so I think what I've learned from a lot of influencers, actually, like that's where I learned from. I learned from influencers. I've learned from entrepreneurs. And I think, you'll see things on social media like people don't support you and and I think like with the, like your own family don't be supporting you, but it's not that. I've learned, like you see that all on social media. And I think taking this, how they be like, it's all like that. But I do,
that voice.
you can hear the people, right? But I think taking that 3-year break, and well, it wasn't a break. I was trying to get my life together. But like the break, the long pause that I took, and just realizing that it's not, you don't want I would love that, but it's not for everybody to listen to. It's not everything. And I had to really, you could feel some type of way about that, but also like, I love the podcast Therapy for Black Girls. And there are times when I get behind, I don't listen to every single episode. Does that mean I don't support Therapy for Black Girls? No. You know what I mean? So you have to like, even our own self, we don't do that. Like I had to look at myself like I don't do that for people's stuff, and I just want to find listeners help. If people share it with their networks, that would help, because we're just trying to get more listeners, get this out there. And yeah, that would be the best way to support us now.
What visions do you have for the future of Evolving Education Project?
Yeah, I definitely want to do more TV series and documentary reviews in a educational conversation way, people of color. Fun, but also like, what can we learn from this? We did our first one with reservation dogs. That was really great. Wanting to sprinkle those in. I also want to get back to making sure that I invite more co-hosts when they're available, because it just offers something really beautiful to have the co-hosts that I have on my website, they just super dope. So just something beautiful with that. Yeah. And just figuring out building a team so that you want to be sustainable. I want to be well. I want to be sleeping and drinking my water and doing what I need to do for myself. I do think I'm well now, but I just hope to also build a team that is aligned and understands, is committed to what we're doing here for however long they stay. I don't own people. I'm not trying to own people forever, but I just want people for the season they're supposed to be with us, and then support you on your journey, as you continue on.
And anything else you want listeners to know that they may not otherwise know?
I want you to know that I really love you and I think about you. I do. I think about the listeners a lot, especially in this season too. I think about listeners very deeply. I really mean that when I say you can help us to help it to evolve over time. And I want to know what you're interested in. Yeah, I really think about you, listeners. And I hope this is brightening your day, making you think, making you pause, making you reflect, making you hopeful about this uncertain world that we're in right now, because we have to keep pushing and we have to sustain ourselves. Like, that's what we have to do. So I think about you all a lot.
You better hit us right in the feels. I think that was my last question. I have other bonus questions, but I just thank you for can I just say the way you command the energy in the room and shift from so many tones within the same, I don't know, it's amazing to witness and to experience, not just live, but I've seen you in so many different venues and spaces, informal, inside of the academy, outside of that, in organizing spaces. Like it's just so so such an honor to be in sisterhood with you, to witness the greatness that has always been a part of your lineage and how you're continuing to carry that forward. I'm just in awe.
Don't make me blush.
Thank you for just the work that you do. That is a love note and a love letter in so many ways to our ancestors and to those who, like I said earlier, we may never know the full impact, and we can definitely feel it. So thank you, sis, for just your hard work in so many ways and in many forms.
She about to have me up here crying on this episode. It's my sissy. How do we know each other, Josephine? We haven't said that.
We always try to figure out what that is.
I
think
know,
we
because we
met.
have a deep sister. This my friend.
Yeah,
This my friend.
I
My
think we just kept
sisters. Like we.
frequenting like the same spaces and kept seeing each other at similar like conferences or community spaces. And I had you stay at my house at one point.
I know. Then you was like, "You're coming to this conference, and you gonna stay with me." I was like, "Okay." And as a doc student with very limited funds,
Yeah.
and somebody let you stay with them because the conference is or the gathering is in their hometown, and they let you stay with them, I was like, "Oh, I like her." And then you gave us ice
I was gonna
cream.
say,
Remember you made us ice
listen,
cream?
I knew Tiffany was my sister because she took over my whole room and my vanity. Okay.
Don't tell them I took over your vanity.
Remember, you had your own vanity after
I
that. I was like,
forgot.
oh, we
I
friends,
forgot. You
friends.
know, because
Like she,
I had to put my, I got to have my diffuser and my lavender oil.
Tiffany.
Cause I get my sleep. Y'all think I'm playing. I'm gonna get my sleep and my rest. And we had to be cute so don't let this one fool you. I know she got a beautiful, sweet, gentle voice, but she is all about being cute. Oh, too, just like me. So she had a vanity for me to put my stuff on. That's what we should be talking about.
I know Asia one time I sent a screenshot of us taking a picture in front of the mirror and she was like, this is so y'all. I was like, me? I thought, I'm like, she's right. Like Tiffany is like a parent on overt, but I'm like, no, she calling me in. She right.
Yes, you just quiet. She quiet with hers, but she just as bad as me. Okay. Yes, I had to have thank you for letting me do my routine.
Yeah, I was going to say, since then, we've done weekly writing routines, and writing means so many different things. Sometimes it's
yes,
connecting about what's on our hearts. Sometimes it's, creating a vision board for how we think about where our work could go, what kinds of forms it could take. And sometimes it's just sitting in our pajamas and talking through whatever's going on in our lives. And it's
via Zoom. And we do this all over Zoom because she on the West Coast and I'm on the East Coast. And it is, our writing partnership where we have our writing meetings for a year. How many years has it been? 6 years?
Is that right?
It got to be 7 or 8 because this is my 5th year at my institution that I'm at now.
Has it been 5 years?
It has to be more than that because I feel like it started and I was still in Buffalo. Weren't we doing it in Buffalo?
I gotta tell the story. I remember one of the first few times we like really interacted. You had reached out to me and asked if I'd be willing to read your dissertation.
Okay.
And I remember feeling like, that feels like a heavy task and I want to like show up fully. I feel so honored. And I also know that could be very vulnerable in so many ways when it's your raw writing, but also like, I don't think we talk enough about I think just the sacred parts of, when we're engaging in our writing. And I think that's different than talking about concerns of intellectual property and how those things can get taken up in really weird ways. And I took that to heart when you shared your writing with me. And I remember I got to take this seriously and come hard at it. And I only was able to really read the first chapter, I think, and shared highlights and comments. And you were so like I know I was doing it for you, but I felt like I received something from that, even from the ways that you were able to see how I see, I think was so affirming because so much about grad school just makes you question everything about what you know and who you are. And I feel like I came into grad school with a clear sense of who I am and what I stand for. And those things don't often get recognized or understood or fully seen. And in the process of sharing feedback on your work, you helped me come back to myself actually. And I always sat with that in so many ways that reminded me of my strength and my power. And I know we joke about, all these other ways of how we are with one another. And that has really touched me in ways that I don't think enough laugh about, but it stayed with me actually. So yeah, there's so many gifts in our interaction.
Well, sis, I just feel like from you, I feel like you are one of the few people, if anyone else, that really gets me as who I am as a scholar. And I've always felt affirmed in like it was okay for me to be the way that I was in the directions that I would take. I used to always be like, especially around that time, am I doing too much? Should I be doing this? Josephine, should I be da, 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 da? And you'll be like, it's fine. I see what you're a learner and you're thinking about things like this. Like I feel like you always understood me as a pedagogue, an intellectual, a theorist, like all those things at once when I didn't even like I would be talking and doing all of this stuff and I would be like, am I doing too much? You're like, no, you're a learner. You're doing this, that, the other. And so you helped me so much, sis. Like just to be confident in who I am as who I am. And not it's I think it's like who you are. Like I'm not an insecure, but I mean like the parts of like our scholarly voice, commitments to communities and all of that mixing together and who being a teacher, educator, like all that mixing together and how we come at all of this is so different from the way a lot of people do it in academia. And so it makes you question everything. It makes you be like, am I doing too much? And it's like, no. But the way you can see, like, I should just let you describe me because the way you describe me, I'll be like, oh, look at me.
Well, that's the other thing I was going to say too. Like, there's so many ways in which you can showcase many ways that you are a creator in this format and platform. Don't get it twisted though. Like if you read Tiffany's scholarly writing, there's so much curated knowledge and how you interweave so many dimensions of criticality and practice and humanity. Like it's poetic, seriously. Like don't sleep on Tiffany's scholarship. Like I've always seen that element represented in all modalities. So I want to say that too, because those were some of the bonus questions I want to ask. Like, how has this shaped your scholarship and practices? Because I think oftentimes we get discouraged for engaging in what is, I don't know, kind of like sometimes reduced to how we think about like community engagement or public scholarship or external or separate from the kinds of things that we do and expected to produce in the academy. And I have a hard time separating it, and I know we've talked about it too. Like how has this actually informed or perhaps sharpened your scholarly identity? Because I think sometimes people think like this feels like a big endeavor. And for early career scholars, perhaps that's not the best way to use our time or channel our time,
Yeah, I do think, and I was telling you this a while ago about, I do think it helps me to get more succinct, like more, I can get to what I'm trying to say more, because I think it's a skill set in podcasting that you have to do. And I know I could get even more succinct. I'm still growing, y'all. But, I do think with, because sometimes I know some of my intros, I know they be long, but I'm figuring it out, But I do think I have gotten like, I think when I'm speaking about my scholarship, like speaking, I'm a little bit more succinct than I used to be. Or if I'm asking a scholarly question now, not for the podcast, but just like in a space of academics, I can be more, I think it's a skill set that you get when you talk to people, when you're in dialogue with people, you grow in that area and all different types of people. Some people, they're not academics, they're practitioners or parents who do other things, artists, like they get you to talk in a different way, but more to the point than I think academia would be like, we'd be like, and, the duality of the existential presence of nepotism in my aura, in my spirit, makes me think, it'd be like, I'd be like, what is you saying, boo? And I think that's beautiful, but I'd be like, what is you saying? What is you saying, child? What is you
It's making
saying?
me think like coming back to our knowledge systems, we often as early career scholars get the advice to write daily and write often. And I wonder if we can expand that to say, create or curate knowledge daily and often. And I think that there's
Yes.
something about the oral traditions of the productions that you're putting on that is sharpening how we critically think, speak, write, and listen to the field of education, So I wonder if there's ways, if this is part of like maybe an undercurrent movement that's already happening in this generation of scholars of how we can think about that in more robust ways. Not that it's not robust, but I think that's not a way to say we're moving away from writing as a modality. I think those are so important.
Right.
And just to say that it's
absolutely.
part of our mini literacies of how they inform and shape one another. Come on, bonus episode and getting me into this other element from our original interviewer mode. So good at that. Okay.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, I don't have any beautiful wrapped up thoughts. You're always so good about helping me think about so many different branches. So I'm sitting with that.
With that. Thank you for doing this, Sissy. And you know what? You are doing what I said at my drink for listeners are, because this was her idea, everybody. She came up with this idea. And so this episode, this is what I mean. This is what I mean about the listeners, saying what they want and doing it. And so I would have never thought to do this. But Josephine, thank you for being already fulfilling my vision and my love for listeners.
Love you, sis. Thank you.
Love you too. I'm so grateful to Josephine for co-producing this episode and for her unique, nuanced, and loving read of the Evolving Education Project as a whole, the podcast, and me. As Josephine said, our intention is to create intimate spaces for listeners. We do this by embodying and enacting the oral traditions of people of color. We consider what is durable and sustained in our communities while being able to relate to the current moment and actualizing the work we need to be doing now. But what I am holding on to the most is how sisterhood has sustained and continues to sustain me for the work. I am so grateful for my sisterhood, Josephine and so many others. You know who you are. And I hope you are holding your sisterhoods, brotherhoods, siblинghoods close. Those friends, those communities that hold you down, that call you in, that love on you. That is the only way through those relationships that we will make it through this work, through the long road ahead. Thank you for listening to Behind the Podcast, Processes, Intentions, and the Fabulously Unexpected. If something from this episode resonates with you, please share it with others and let us know via social media or through our website, evolvingeducationproject.com. The book and previous episodes mentioned in this episode will be linked in the show notes. Be sure to tune in next Wednesday for the start of our new series on Black boys and Black male teachers. Trust, you do not want to miss it. To find out more about the Evolving Education Project, to write in or to join our listserv, check us out at evolvingeducationproject.com. And please subscribe to this podcast and follow us on YouTube, Instagram, X, Facebook, and TikTok, since it's back up. If you can only choose one, please follow us on Instagram and love all of our posts. Support that doesn't cost a dime. If you've been enjoying our podcast, you can also support us by writing a review. Favorable reviews help more educators, organizers, families, communities, and activists find us. We hope to continue to cultivate an authentic audience and community. We want you to help us to evolve over time and shape what this can be. Now that you know what we're about, and you should really know what we're about after this episode, let us know what you would like to learn more about, authors that you would like us to interview, discussions you would like to have. Okay, that's all for now, good people. We out.